Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to my kitchen. And day 17, yay! Um, it's more of the same, I'm afraid. And I just wanted to show you, and I don't know if I sped it up too fast or not, but you could see where my starter rose and fell. And I'm really thinking that he's going to be a big, strong starter. So keep your fingers crossed. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you all. But anyways, it's more of the same. Mix your starter. Empty jar. Zero it out. Add your 10 grams of starter. Add 50 grams of water. Take it off the scale. Mix. Put it back on the scale. Add 50 grams of flour. Mix. Mark the top of your starter. Mark the date that you started it and what day you're on. 17. Yay! And put her lid on. And you're good to go. That's how quickly it is to feed your starter once you get used to doing it. So, but today I want to talk to you about something else, about baker's percentage. And I'm not sure if I talked about this already. I feel like I did, but I'm not really sure where. It might be under the bulking up your starter video. But baker's percentage is basically just a baking notation where every ingredient is expressed as a percentage of the flour weight. So if you want to figure out your baker's percentage, your flour is always going to be 100%, okay? It doesn't matter what the recipe says. It doesn't matter what the recipe calls for. In baker's percentage, the flour is always 100%, okay? So it is the weight of the ingredient divided by the weight of the flour times 100, okay? So in my recipe that I use for a standard sourdough loaf, I use 500 grams of bread flour and I use 340 grams of water. And that gives me a baker's percentage of my water at 68%. Okay? So remember, flour is always expressed as 100%. Then your weight of the ingredient is divided by the weight of the flour. And then you're going to multiply that by 100. So they use baker's percentages to make it easy to scale. It's easy to weigh everything, and you could scale up and down so quickly using baker's percentage. So keep that in mind. And I just wanted to go over some typical ingredient ranges when it comes to percentages, like water, okay? In most recipes that call for water, the percentage is between 60 and 85%, okay? If you're using a high hydration, your dough is going to be very sticky for a very long time, and you're going to have to work it so that the flour absorbs the water and becomes manageable. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. You're going to see that when we mix our first loaf, our dough is going to be sticky and shaggy once we're done mixing it. However, there are things that you can do with your dough that bring it under control. And I don't want to say that your dough is going to be out of control. It's going to be a shaggy, sticky dough, okay? So when you figure out what your hydration level is going to be. Now, remember, you're going to make this recipe your own. So if you live in a high humidity climate, you may want to scale back on the water maybe to 67% or 65%. So whatever ratio you're using for flour, I use 500 grams on every loaf of sourdough that I make. It doesn't matter if it's a croissant loaf or a inclusion loaf or I just drew a blank. A sandwich loaf. One loaf of bread for me is 500 grams of flour. Okay? And because of my experimentation with my doughs, I went from 70% hydration down to, which would be 350% or 350 grams of water, down to 68%, which is 340 grams of water. And that gives me the right amount of hydration in my dough to give me the texture and the crumb that I like. So keep that in mind. I'm going to give you a standard recipe, and once you work with it over and over again, you're going to make changes. Maybe it's too salty for you. Maybe it's not. I use 10 grams of salt, which is only like, I don't know, I think it's like 1.75% or something like that. I can't remember I have it written down somewhere. I don't know where. I thought it was in my recipe box, but it's not. And that's bad. I've made this loaf so many times, I've memorized the recipe. So that's not a big deal. But anyways, that's water. 60 to 85% is about the range for water. Salt is 1.8 to 2.2%. If you're using a yeast is usually 0.5% all the way to 2%. It's a very small percentage when it comes to flour. And in the range of a regular standard loaf of bread. I'm not talking about sourdough. You don't put yeast in sourdough unless you're using discard. Even then, I would question it. And most bakers I know don't use any of that stuff in their discard recipes. Sugar, I don't put sugar in my starter, but you might want to later on. You might want to build another starter, and that is 2 to 20%. Butter or oil is 3 to 60%, depending on what you're making. Okay? Like, I make sourdough chocolate chip cookies, and they have a high fat content. It's only 1 stick of butter, but be that as it may. And for your starter, you want to use 10 to 30% of your starter in your recipes. It's not anything that's like set in stone, but you know. So that's baker's percentage. And if you have any questions about that, please leave them in the comments, or you can email me. My email address is in there somewhere. And that's it for today. I hope you all have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you back here tomorrow.